Hi there, John McAdams here, and you are listening to episode 401 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. Field and Stream shooting editor Richard Mann joins me on the show again today to talk about his favorite cartridges for hunting darn near anything. And Richard and I play the same game. Joseph von Benedict, Ron Spomer, Adam Weiss, and Larry Weissoon and I have all played on the show previously, where we each discuss our favorite cartridge and bullet selections from game ranging from whitetail deer all the way up to and including thick-skinned dangerous game like Cape buffalo. We also talk about our selections for just about everything in between as well. Now, links to those episodes are in the episode description if you have not already listened to those shows and heard what those guys have to say about this same subject. Now, before Richard and I get started, I have one very important announcement to share with you. I am honored to be among those nominated for the Podcast of the Year category at the 2026 Gundies. Thank you very much to all of you who nominated me for this award. Now I need your votes again to actually win this award. So please go to thegundies.com and vote for me, John McAdams of the Big Game Hunting Podcast, to win the Podcast of the Year category. You can vote once each day from now until when voting closes on 15 December 2025. So as the saying goes, vote early and vote often. The Gundies Award ceremony is 19 January 2026 at the Venetian Hotel in Las Vegas, the night before SHOT Show begins. So thank you very much for your vote. I have put a link to where you can go to vote in the episode description. All right, now let's get started talking to Richard. All right. Good morning, Richard. It is a pleasure having you back on the show again. Thanks a lot for joining me today.
Good morning.
So we are going to play the fun game. I've played with a couple of other different guys on the show over the last couple of years where we talk about our favorite cartridges and bullets for hunting different types of game. And the way the game works is you can use a cartridge one time. So your favorite elk cartridge cannot be your favorite deer cartridge, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll work our way down the list. We'll talk about our favorite deer cartridges, elk, bear, all that stuff. We'll even go up to hunting thick-skinned dangerous game in Africa. I'll share my choices for each one. You can share yours. If you have an interesting story involving one of them, we can share that, and then we'll move on to the next one. Now,
Sure.
At the very end, I'm going to ask you your favorite two all-around cartridges. One for hunting everything that's not dangerous game, and everything to include dangerous game. And so those you can reuse. So your favorite elk cartridge can be your favorite all-around cartridge, but
Gotcha.
all of that. So if you're ready to go, we'll get started with our favorite cartridge for hunting eastern whitetail deer. So what do you like to use out there in West Virginia?
Well, I use a lot of stuff. I use a 223. I use a 30 Remington AR. It's kind of my test bed because that's where I'm at, where I test a lot of different cartridges and bullets. But
Mhm.
there's just something to me, you'd like to say 30-30 Winchester for the woods, hunting in the woods, but there's something about the 35 Remington that I don't know. I'm drawn to it. I think maybe the first really nice deer my father killed the year before I was born, he shot it with a Remington pump 760 and 35 Remington. And that deer hung on the wall for my entire life. And that cartridge was historic, so 35 Remington.
And what is your favorite bullet for use on deer out of the 35 Remington?
I don't think it matters really. Any 200, the 220 grain buffalo bore load and 35 Remington is pretty wicked. It's a 220 grain spear bullet, but I don't think it really matters with that one.
Yeah, especially under the conditions you're going to be using that thing on anyway, and especially on the game we're talking about here. I have also hunted quite a bit with a 35 Remington, several of the different Remington autoloader cartridges. My dad had a fascination with those when I was a kid, and at one time he had a Model 8 or an 81 in 25, 30, 32, and 35 Remington. I killed a real nice feral hog out here in East Texas with a Model 81 in 35 Remington. I don't even remember what kind of bullet it was. I think it was a 200 grain something, right?
Yeah.
And it worked great on it. That, as much as I like that cartridge, that's not my favorite for deer though. That'll darn sure work. I killed my first two deer with a 308 So that is what I'm going to go with, 165 grain Federal Fusion. But I mean, same deal. There's 100 different bullets that'll work great in a 308 on
Yeah.
deer under 150 yards and in. So let's back up a second. You said your dad had a Remington pump. What rifle would you be using in that 35 Remington? You have a Marlin 336?
Um, well, I used to have a new ultralight arms. The first custom rifle I ever bought was a new ultralight arms Model 20, and I
Mhm.
had it chambered, believe it or not, in 35 Remington because I wanted the ideal whitetail rifle.
Right.
I ended up trading that rifle, and I've had a bunch of new ultralight arms rifles since. But the 35 Remington I have now is a Marlin 336 with a 16-inch barrel. It's a takedown lever gun that Jerry Dove from Dove Custom Guns built, and it's so cool because the 16-inch barrel, everything it together is about 34 inches. And you take it apart and put it in a little pack, and you can carry it up the mountain or put it behind your truck seat. So, and it runs I got a little scout scope. That's it right there. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, man. Like that is a compact and easy to carry rifle in its full setup, and man, you take it down like that, geez, and yeah, it don't take up hardly any space at all.
Yeah.
So for those that are watching or listening to this, Richard just released another book, Rifle Cartridges for the Hunter. We'll reference this probably several times during the course of the episode, but I was reading it last night, and I paid particular attention to the 35 Remington portion of your book because that was a cartridge I also have an affinity for, and I thought that was a very interesting rifle. I did not realize that Marlin ever made a takedown in 35 Remington.
They didn't. Jerry Dove converts them.
Okay,
He'll take any Marlin and convert it to a takedown like that. Yeah.
all right, very very good. All right, so that was Eastern whitetail. Shorter range hunting, thicker conditions. It sounds like the sort of hunting that you do for whitetail is not too dissimilar from the hunting I do out here in East Texas. Not very long shots in general. But what about Western whitetail or mule deer hunts where you're in more open country, might need to take a longer shot? What would you use for that?
You mixing mule deer and whitetail, Western deer.
Western deer, yeah.
When I was little, my cousin had a 7mm Remington Magnum. I was 13 years old. That thing was just magical. Seemed like a cannon to us. But I wanted something better than what he had. I wanted a 264 Winchester. Couldn't find one anywhere. Ended up with a 270, but specifically mule deer hunting, Western hunting, the 264 Win Mag I think it just fits. I don't think you need that much gun, but I think it just, in my mind, that's what belongs to on a mule deer hunt.
And that is really what that cartridge was designed for by Winchester when they released it. Mule deer hunting, antelope, all that stuff. Like you said, you don't necessarily need it, but it was marketed heavily for that, and it'll darn sure work well for that.
Yeah, the early advertisements, if you can find them on the internet, you do a little Googling, you can find them, said that the 264 Win Mag had a hell of a bang and a hell of a wallop, which I thought was a pretty cool advertisement.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you killed your first mule deer with a 264 Win Mag, right?
I did. With a Remington 700 Sendero.
Now, once again, there's a lot of different bullets that'll work out of this cartridge on mule deer or Western whitetail like that. But, if you were going to take a 264 Win Mag out west today, what would you use?
I'd use the bullet I used on my first mule deer. It was a 130 grain Nosler Accubon.
Yeah, very good bullet for that. And it sounded like it worked darn well on that mule deer you talked about in your book, too. Yeah. So for me, I would go with a cartridge that gives me very similar performance to the 264 Win Mag in reality, which is the 270 Winchester, 145 grain ELDX in this case. And I think it was one of those deals where the 270 coupled with the fact that the 270 already existed, coupled with the fact that the 7 Rim Mag came out a couple years later, was the whole reason why the 264 Win Mag isn't more popular today.
Yeah, and I think the gun writers did a lot to negate the 264, talking about it burning barrels up, and but the 270, that when I was 14, I took my paper money from my paper route to buy a 264 Win Mag and couldn't find one, and ended up with a 270. Couldn't wait, waiting for that gun for 2 years, and went ahead and got a 270, and I shot a lot of deer with a 270.
And that is it's an awesome deer round, but it'll work for all kinds of other stuff too. I have a good friend that's killed, I think, 3 or 4 moose with his. He's taken it to Africa. He's killed kudu, wildebeest, all of that stuff with it. And, of course, he uses it on deer too. Just awesome, awesome cartridge. And with the right bullet, there's not much this side of Cape Buffalo you can't hunt with it.
Yep.
All right. What about another Western animal, pronghorn antelope?
Shot my first pronghorn with a 257 Roberts. Um, and I don't know if you can find a better pronghorn cartridge. You don't need a lot of gun to kill a pronghorn. They're not, not harder to kill than a whitetail deer. And that's just a classic cartridge. Uh, Load it with like a 110 Nosler AccuBond or even a 100 grain ballistic tip, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that ballistic. I mean, the AccuBond darn sure work. I think a ballistic tip would is almost asking to be used on something like an antelope, like that. 257 Roberts is an interesting cartridge. 7 millimeter Mauser, neck down to 257 caliber. She got a giant case for it, and it's the only plus P Sandy standardized round I'm aware of.
Yep.
And super old cartridge, but man, still just kind of kicking along today. And especially for guys like you that like those 25 caliber cartridges.
It won't go away. I mean,
Mhm.
it's never been a really popular cartridge, but it won't go away. And an interesting fact: when Ned Roberts wildcatted that cartridge, he did it to shoot groundhogs at long range.
Mhm.
And then Remington introduced it when they legitimized it with a 117 grain round nose bullet, which
Mm.
didn't help its ballistics at all,
Yeah.
But it just seems like that's the cartridge that will not die.
So, what kind of rifle have you used in 257 Roberts?
Oh, I've had a bunch of them. The one I shot my first pronghorn with was a single shot Cooper,
Mhm.
which was a wonderful little rifle. Um, but I had a NOLA and 257 Roberts. I had uh, that Remington, or I'm sorry, the Ruger Ultralight. The one that come out with a really thin barrel and had the little black 4-end tip on it.
Mhm.
Had one of those. Wouldn't shoot worth a nickel. But I picked up a Remington 700. They had a limited run of stainless steel 257 Roberts on a long action. And I picked up one of those and put a HS Precision stock on it. And that was probably the best shooting 257 Roberts I ever had.
Now, one of the really cool things about Ruger is they seem to do a good job of offering less common cartridges like that are still they still kind of have a following to them. And I know they've offered different rifles in 257 Roberts over the years, and I'm looking on their website right now. I see they offer it in their Hawkeye.
They
So
still
that it,
offer it?
yeah, it's listed on their website right now. It's a distributor exclusive,
Hmm.
but yeah. And I want to say they offered it in their Hawkeye African or something like that recently as well. So yeah, I mean it's not something that there's a ton of options out there for, but you can get it. And I know Hornady, among other companies, and probably Remington too, makes factory ammo for it.
Yeah, Nosler does too, I believe.
Okay, very very good. So for me, I'm going to go a little bit different route with the antelope. I'll go 6.5 Creedmoor, 143 grain ELDX for this one. I was on an antelope hunt in Colorado with a guide in 2022, and I met this guy first thing in the morning, go out to hunt, and it's that kind of uh, getting to know each other, feeling each other out sort of thing. And he's like, "So what cartridge you hunt with today?" And I kind of sheepishly said, "Well, 6.5 Creedmoor." And he's like, "Oh, I love the 6.5 Creedmoor. I think that's the best antelope round there is." And all that. I was like, "Wow, that is not at all what I was expecting you to say." And he told me he had guided antelope hunts out in this part of Colorado for like 40 years. And he said that guys that used all kinds of stuff and whatnot, but he had loved the 243 for a long time,
Mhm.
and then got a 6.5 Creedmoor when it came out, and he's like, "Man, this is way better than the 243," and it was enough in all the right areas, where it was good in the wind
Yeah,
and
yeah.
killed the antelope well and all that, but it didn't recoil a lot, and the rifles weren't super heavy or any of that stuff, and I've killed antelope with a 300 Win Mag, and that also worked great. But man, the 6.5 Creedmoor was also just as good, and it wasn't nearly as heavy and didn't recoil as much, and all of that stuff.
Well, of all the game that I've hunted, uh, people talk about long range mule deer, elk, sheep, and all that, but pronghorn probably opens itself up to more long range shots than any other animal. They're just so hard. Some you can get them in places that are just so hard to stalk. There's just
Mhm.
no terrain features or anything. So having a little reach is good on a pronghorn hunt.
And they often live in that kind of more open country where you are often dealing with wind as
Yeah.
well. And, um, that like I said, there's lots of stuff that'll work, but man, that 6.5 Creedmoor just does so darn well in the wind with the right bullets that it's almost the easy button
Yeah.
with it. Um, Interestingly, I've every antelope I've ever killed, I killed from a prone shooting position with a bipod, and those are the only shots I've ever taken on a game animal. Or I guess I took one other one, but on a tar in New Zealand. That's the only thing I've ever been able to shoot prone. Else has been standing, sitting, something like that.
I think it's funny because, you bipods get a lot of press and, the attachment to the rifle and there's some good options out there. Like the Spartan system is
Hmm.
fantastic, but I haven't had a lot of opportunities to use a bipod in my hunting. The one antelope that I did kill with a bipod was with a 30 AR out of a AR-15.
Hmm.
And I shot it off a bipod at like 408 yards or something like that. But yeah, I don't use tripods and shooting sticks are
Hmm.
much more commonly used by me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you almost have to be hunting on like a golf course type area to be able to use a bipod. I mean, just a tiny bit, a foot of grass is too
Yeah,
much for the
yeah.
for the most part to shoot with a bipod. I killed my most recent antelope. I used a Spartan bipod, and all the other ones I used with the old Harris bipod.
There's no
But even
comparison between those.
oh my, hell yeah, the Spartan is so much nicer.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about another Western animal that's also kind of small, that also sometimes can present a longer shot. And this one would be a coues deer.
Um, I shot one coues deer, unless you count the Del Carmen whitetail, which is down in Texas, which is
Hmm.
essentially the same thing. Uh, Shot one, the Del Carmen I shot with a 30 AR, and then the one I shot in Mexico, I shot with a 6.5 Creedmoor, and that seemed to be an ideal place. And then you talk about windy, it was extremely windy, and you're a lot of times you're ridge line to ridge line, with
Hmm.
those because you're having to glass them and stuff. So that's where I would put the 6.5 Creedmoor.
All right. I think that'd be a good place for it. Yeah. You want to go with the ELDX here?
Yeah, probably, or yeah, I think the LDX probably best wind bucking bullet you can get in that 6.5 Creedmoor.
No. Now, like you, I've also not done a ton of coues deer hunting. I've killed one. I killed him with a 300 Win Mag and a 165 Barnes, and he ran 10 feet and just disappeared. And I was like, where did he go? And then I realized that he had just fallen into the
Yeah.
tall grass and died when I got down there. Um, we talk about antelope, being potential for a longer shot. I think all my antelope I killed between 150 and 230 yards, and I killed that coues deer at like 160 yards, something like that. I was glassing real far and then looked close, and he was right there, and I ended up shooting him. 300 Win Mag, I think would work fine, but once again, you just don't need it. I would go with a 22 Creedmoor though if I were
Mm,
going on another coues deer hunt in the future, and I'd go with the 80 grain ELDX for that one. Man, you get almost the same wind call as you do with the 6.5
mm,
Creedmoor, but man, it shoots just almost like a laser.
yeah.
I've killed a couple of hogs and one white-tailed deer with a 22 Creedmoor, and nothing went more than about 5 feet afterwards. That's an awesome, awesome little cartridge. Speaking of feral hogs, if you were coming to Texas or Georgia or Florida or something like that, hunting feral hogs, what cartridge would you use for that?
Uh, most of the hunting I've done with feral hogs has been over a bait
Hmm.
pile or something. The range has been close. I know there's opportunities to shoot them further, but I would probably go with a AR-15 and a 300 hammer. Which just yeah, I mean, out of the AR-15, since the 30 Remington AR is now extinct for all
Hmm.
practical purposes, that 300 Hammer, I think, is the best hunting cartridge in the AR-15.
Yes. That's a pretty new cartridge too, like Sammy standardized like 2019, 2020, something like that, right?
Yeah, it'd been around for I think Bill Wilson developed it a couple years prior to that, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Sig Sauer submitted it to Horn or Sammy
Hmm.
for him in 2019, and But it's just it's a ballistically it's a 30-30 Winchester out of an AR-15, but you get the advantage of a little higher to use higher BC bullets because you can use pointed bullets like a 110 AccuBond or a 125 AccuBond. I'm sorry. So those more pointy bullets out of the 300 hammer make it perform a little better than a 30-30.
Um, Tell us more about some of the specific loads that you have used in the 300 hammer. I have a passing familiarity with it, but I've never actually shot one myself.
Yeah, well, I took one to Africa last year. It was this year, last year, this year. Can't remember now. Uh, I used the 115 tip control chaos from Lehigh Defense, and shot a bunch of warthogs with it. And those bullets, I don't think people realize the the advantage those control chaos bullets give you when you're shooting an animal. They're a monometal bullet,
Mhm,
and all the monometal bullets that we're familiar with, they upset with a really wide frontal diameter and penetrate very deep.
mhm,
The control chaos, instead of flowering out or mushrooming, the front of that bullet just turns into shrapnel and
mhm,
break the petals, instead of peeling back, the petals break off almost immediately on impact, and then they radiate out forward. So they still got their own velocity and energy to provide more wounding. And then the shank of the bullet is caliber diameter or just a little larger, and it penetrates like a spear, because it's really small. Short story: my wife shot a black wildebeest in South Africa with a 7mm '08 using a control chaos bullet. I thought she missed. The PH thought she missed. The tracker thought she missed. We saw the bullet impact between the legs behind the animal. We went hunting. We come back through the same place later, and we noticed the herd, and there was one bull laying down, and we got the glass in it, and we could see this big red bulbous projection right at his diaphragm on his belly. And it was the bull she had shot, and we ended up shooting it. But what had happened is she hit that wildebeest as slightly as you could hit any animal. I mean, it went in probably we went through about 2 inches of wildebeest right on the brisket, right in front, right at the diaphragm. And one of those petals had come off and went up through the body cavity and severed a major artery and,
oh, wow.
and made him sick. And had it been a typical bullet, we'd have probably never seen him again.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, he would have just had a crease right across his chest,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah.
So those bullets, they don't get a lot of they're not from a major company like Remington, Federal, Hornady, but those things are wicked.
Mhm. And how fast are you able to push them out of a 300 hammer?
Depending on the weight, you can get 2450.
Mhm.
Like I said, you're
And you
looking at 30-30 ballistics.
Yeah. And tell me again what the weight was on that Lehigh Defense?
The one I used in Africa on the warthogs was 115.
Okay.
Bill
Alright.
Wilson really likes the 135s, and he shoots a ton of hogs down in Texas with that thing. So
Yeah, so a 300 blackout, which is actually my choice for this. So, I mean, it sounds like the 300 blackout is it just wishes it were a 300 hammer, and the
yeah,
300 hammer kind of fixes some of the shortcomings of the 300 blackout. 300 blackout was designed to serve two masters with the really good subsonic performance and the good supersonic, whereas the 300 hammer, they don't worry so much about the subsonic. We just push it
yeah,
hard on the
yeah,
the faster side of things, and you can get it going faster. So I think the Barnes load for the 300 blackout, which is what I have used for it in the past, you're pushing 110 grain bullet, maybe 2,300 feet per second, something like that. So you're pushing a bullet a little bit heavier, over 100 feet per second faster, probably out of your 300 hammer.
yeah. And if you want subsonic, if you want to hunt subsonic, the blackout's clearly the way to go. There's no
Mm-hmm.
question about that. I don't think it has enough ass behind it comparatively to the 300 hammer, to run supersonic.
Yeah. If I were gonna be buying a new AR or something like that for use on hogs, man, uh, especially if I didn't already have a 300 blackout, I might be going with the 300 hammer. Um, but I didn't quite know what I was doing when
Well,
I bought this one.
when Wilson Combat took over New Ultralight Arms, they started making that little Model 20S rifle that Melvin Forbes had made, which has it's size for the 223, but they have
Mhm.
a longer magazine box. It's 2.5-inch magazine box, and that rifle weighs about 4.9 pounds. And you put a 300 hammer in that, and man, you've got a pretty potent. I mean, you could eastern whitetails, hogs. I think Bill Wilson's killed almost all African plains game with that 300 hammer.
Man. I believe it. I've never killed anything with that Lehigh defense bullet, but I've shot him into gel, and I mean, it performed exactly like you described it would, with great penetration and with those tiny little
Mhm.
petals kind of going everywhere like that. I'll bet it would make a mess out of the inside of something. Um, all right, very very good. So you want to go say with the 115 controlled chaos for your bullet here?
Yeah, tip control chaos 115 grain, 300 hammer on hogs.
Now, it sounds like from your description of it that it performs similar to, say, a hammer bullet or something. Is that an accurate description of the control chaos?
Similar, yeah. I've never used a hammer bullet. I've shot them into paper, but I've never shot an animal with the hammer bullets. The There's some history behind that. There's a company in France that made a bullet called the GPA bullet uh,
Okay.
20 years ago, and it was designed to shed the petals. Not really petals. It just turned to shrapnel when it hit an animal.
Hmm.
And I took one of those to Africa and 148 grain out of a 300 Win Mag and shot all kinds of stuff in Africa with it. And long story short, if you read the last chapter of the book, or not near the last chapters of the book about the 500 Cyrus, they were trying to put together bullets for that, and I showed them that uh, GPA bullet from France, and that was kind of the beginning of the Control Chaos design, and that's the difference. Some of those, like you can shoot a Barnes triple shock, you can push it fast enough to blow the petals off of it. The difference
Hmm.
is they peel all the way back and then just trail in behind the bullet. Uh, the trick with the Control Chaos bullet and like that GPA is you get almost immediate pedal separation on penetration, so they still have their own velocity going forward. They don't peel back, so it makes a nasty wound.
Yeah. And there's one of the downsides that you can get with a copper bullet is compared to, say, a real soft lead bullet like an ELDX, it gives you a more narrow wound. You get great penetration, but more narrow.
Yep.
But man, with something like what you're describing, where you got the pedals going everywhere, you're getting closer to that, and can. I'm not saying the Barnes bullet's bad or any of that stuff. I killed a lot of stuff with them, and they've worked well. But it seems like this is a way to potentially enhance it.
Yeah, it's funny. Barnes used to kind of advertise 100% weight retention, more tissue damage. And from my experiences, those two things don't go together.
Hmm.
Bullets that shed weight uh, tend to damage much more tissue. Now, they won't penetrate as deep,
Hmm.
but that's the advantage of the Control Chaos. You get the shrapnel that comes out from the bullet, but then the shank still gives you that deep penetration.
Yeah, and because you shed, even though you shed weight, because you shed some of that frontal surface area is not subject to as much drag, and it penetrates better than someone would think from a bullet that lost, I don't know, 30% of its weight or something like that.
Yeah. And the thing that I've found with the triple shocks and all of the modern monometal bullets that retain all their weight, the faster you push them, the better results you're going to see on animals.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's been my experience with it as well. And while, maybe 2,000 feet per second minimum impact velocity is a good rule of thumb for a traditional lead core bullet, maybe 2,300 is more what you need to be looking at for a minimum on a Barnes bullet in a traditional caliber.
Yeah, just a quick story. I was on a hunt with Remington and we were using their R25 308 Winchester AR-10 essentially.
Hmm.
And we were culling deer in Texas, and the ammo they provided was 168 grain Barnes triple shocks,
Hmm.
and we were just culling deer. I mean, the first day I think we killed almost 30 deer. We didn't find half the deer. Uh, Part of that was because rattlesnakes were terrible and the brush was really thick, and we didn't do a lot of tracking when they went into the brush. But the next day, everybody was complaining. They're saying, well, these bullets are too tough to open up on the deer. Well, that's not the case. The bullets were opening, they just wasn't damaging much. tissue because they're running at such a slow velocity out of a 16-inch barrel 308.
Yeah.
Somebody had a box of an ammo can full of Hornady Zombie Max 308 ammo, and
Hmm.
we switched to that, and we started shooting deer, and they just falling down. So that's a good reference of how those triple shock or monometal bullets really need the speed to get the tissue damage that you see from like a lead core bullet.
Hmm. All right. Yeah. I mean, makes total sense. Well, let's move on to the next one. We're going to talk about hunting black bear. We're going to have two different scenarios. So, two different cartridge choices here, one for black bear over bait, one spot and stalk.
Um, Over bait, I would take a 358 Winchester. It just seems like the perfect black bear. First black bear I ever killed was in Montana. It was a spot and stalk hunt, but I did use a 358 Winchester.
Hmm.
And then I don't know that it's needed or necessary, but it just seems like the 35 Wayland would be the perfect spot and stalk black bear cartridge. If a 358 works good up close, then a 35 Wayland would be ideal for spot and stalk. And you're good. Some of those modern loads, those things are screaming. You're good at 300, 350 yards with that.
So we have a 308 necked up to a 30 cal, and we have a 30-06 necked up to, or a 35 cal for each
Yeah.
of these 308 and 30-06, respectively.
Yeah.
So that's you got 335 cal cartridges on your list so far too, between those two and the 35 Remington. I think all solid choices. I've considered using the 35 Remington for my baited black bear. I went with the 4570 in my case. When I was growing up, I did a lot of hunting out here in East Texas. Not a lot of very long range shots. My dad was a connoisseur of older guns, a lot of lever guns and stuff like that. And so, I killed deer. I killed what is still my biggest whitetail with a 32 Remington. I killed a couple deer with that 308, and I did a lot of hunting with a 4570. And it was only until recent, maybe the last 10 years that I've kind of gotten away from the 4570, but I killed a lot of stuff with it over the years. And so I'd use that for bait. 7 rim mag, 160 grain Accubon for the spot and stalk. What bullets you like for the 358 Winchester and the 35 Wayland?
The Accubon load for that is pretty wicked. I shot a couple whitetail deer with that, and I thought I thought the bullets were blowing up or something when they hit that. I had never seen so much damage. I shot one deer with it. It was a young whitetail doe. She probably weighed 80, 85 pounds live weight. And
Hmm.
we strung her up, and she hadn't been field dressed, and you could see through the hole, you know. But I don't think it really matters with that 35 Wayland. I shot a kudu with I think it was a 200 grain triple shock, which would be a fantastic. I think it was a buffalo boar load, which would be
Hmm.
fantastic for that. Yeah.
Well, so is this what you were referring to in your book? The ground around my tree stand was covered with about an inch of fresh snow, and the area around both deer looked like a murder scene out of a serial killer movie.
Yeah, it was nasty.
Yeah. So
That's a
you
bi-
describe.
that's way overgun for a whitetail deer.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, especially a big whitetail in West Virginia. I mean, sometimes we'll get a live weight over 200, but 150 pounds is about average for a live weight deer, and that's I shoot them with a 223 most of the time. So that's way overgunned.
Yeah. So you talk about shooting a doe and a spike. Doe had taken the bullet through both lungs, hit a rib on exit. You could have pushed a baseball in the exit wound.
Yeah,
And you said that not much happened with that spike, but you shot him when he was moving, and you made a bad shot
yeah,
on him, but you just went boom. That was that. So I mean, that is the thing, right? People always say a smaller bullet in the right spot is better than a bigger one in the wrong spot, and that is true. But we don't always put it in the right spot, and with that bigger bullet, you get some more room for error with that sometimes.
yeah. And it's funny about that. I think not just that's a common uh, phrase. What you said, little bullet, right spot. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. My phone connected to my computer. But if you're using a good bullet, couple years ago, I gut shot a whitetail doe running with a 223.
Hmm.
And I knew it as soon as I pulled the trigger. I didn't lead her enough. But I had a 60 grain nozzler partition and hit behind the diaphragm right through the nasty part. And she didn't go 40, 50 yards and just tumbled down the hill. So I think the good bullet makes a tremendous amount of difference,
Hmm.
especially when you're using the smaller cartridges.
Well, let's see if I can adjust this. So this big deer right there, my grandfather shot that deer with a 35 Whelen, 250 grain, just plain old Hornady round nose bullet down in South Texas.
Yeah.
And to that point in his life, he had killed almost all of his deer with smaller cartridges. He really had a 6.5-06 Ackley improved that
Oh,
he just
really?
loved. And so he was shooting a lot of stuff with, say, 120 grain Sierras and stuff with it. And he killed that deer after years. I think that might have actually been the last deer he ever killed. But he killed that deer after years and years of using those small, high velocity bullets. And he really wanted to see what that 250 grain 35 cal would look like. And he shot this deer, and it was facing almost straight on. Shot it right in the chest, and he was looking as he was field dressing it, couldn't find it, and then he turned it over and he said there was a big bullet hole in its rear ham where it had exited.
Yeah.
So she said, well, so he still doesn't know what a 250 grain 35 cal looks like after it goes through a deer.
Yeah, the only thing you got to be careful with, like with that 35 Whalen, if you're going to stretch the distance a little bit, is the monometal bullet, because those things lose velocity quick.
Mm-hmm.
Out of that big, they don't have high BC. So I think one of the soft point bullets or something would be much better if you're going to stretch the range with that, because you still got a lot of bullet weight. You're still going to get all the penetration you need.
Now, the 35 Whelen seems like it is a cartridge that has really made a comeback in the last couple of years. It seemed like it was just kind of trucking along under the radar, but it seems like it's become legal to use in certain states, like
Yeah,
Iowa.
and I'm not sure
Yeah.
what they are, but there's at least one state where it meets the straight wall. It's not a straight wall
Mhm.
cartridge, but there's one state where you can use it and you can't use a 30-06 or a 308 or
Mhm.
something. And that's like if CVA's making that little Scout single shot
Mhm.
breakdown rifle, and they make it in 35 Whelen specifically
Mhm.
for locations like that. It may be two states, I'm not sure, but that's
Yeah,
really
so
brought
if
it back.
I was looking at this the other day, Iowa let you use it because it's 35 cal or above, and Louisiana lets you use it in their primitive season if it's in a single shot firearm like the Scout. So that's two markets that recently got opened up to it, and now I know Ruger makes it in addition to CVA and whatnot. So you got a lot more options than was the case not too long ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And plus you got Remington and I think Remington makes it, but certainly Hornady does and all of that stuff. So you got factory ammo available for it
Hornady
too.
makes a super performance load. I can't remember. I think it's like a 200 grain bullet at 2,900 feet per second or something. It's pretty crazy.
That sounds right, and man, that is screaming
Yeah.
out of that card. So that's an interesting deal. So the 35 Whelen is shooting a 200 grain bullet faster than the 30-06 is shooting a 180 grain bullet.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
the one of the rules of ballistics, if you take two cartridges, perfect example, 708 and 308.
Mhm.
You load a 150 grain bullet in both of them. Now the 7 millimeter bullet's going to have a higher BC, but because the 308 has larger surface area on the back, you're going to get more velocity out of it. And
Mhm.
it's the same thing with the Whalen. You take the same bullet weight in a Whalen and a 30-06. That more surface area on the back of the Whalen will allow you to get more velocity out of it.
Well, I recently, literally just received this week, a CVA Scout in 35 Whelen that I'm getting ready to start playing with. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well,
I've heard all about this cartridge, but never shot anything with it
get you
before.
some of that Hornady or Buffalo bore ammo, and then get you a little pillow about that big and put it between your shoulder and the stock when you're sighting it in, because that little rifle is going to buck in 35 Whelen.
All right, fair enough. I'll keep that in mind. All right, so moving on to the next category. What cartridge do you like for elk?
I think I'd go with the 300 Win Mag. 300 Win Mag and probably a 200 grain AccuBond or 180 grain AccuBond. I
You
don't.
like those AccuBond bullets?
Yeah, I've probably killed more animals with AccuBonds than anything else, and I think, and the reason I've always described them as kind of a cross between the ballistic tip and the nozzler partition. The
Hmm.
problem with the nozzler partitions lots of times is you can't get real good precision out of them. And the
Right.
problem with the ballistic tip, lots of times they shed a lot of weight when you push them real fast. But that AccuBond, all of those AccuBonds shoot really well and they hold together really well. You don't need a 300 Win Mag to shoot an elk. I've killed them with 308s. The farthest shot I've shot on an elk was 329 yards with a 308 using the 175 grain ELDX bullet. Uh, but I think for 300 Win Mag, 200, 180 grain AccuBond.
I mean, that is a classic elk hunting cartridge, and I mean, two variations of one really solid, just all around bullet, but one that'll also work darn well on elk. I killed my first elk with a 300 Win Mag. Last month I killed one with a 7 PRC with a 175 grain spear impact on that Remington load, and he was slightly quartering away from me, just a little bit, like 330 yards, and I hit him right behind the shoulder, and it looked like somebody turned on a hose spraying blood out of that elk. We got it on video,
Yeah.
and he stood there for a second, turned and ran up the hill, and then just kind of bucked, rear back on his legs and bucked back down. He was on his feet 10 seconds after the shot. Just absolutely hammered him. When we field dressed that deer, or that elk, I looked at the heart, and you could see daylight through the
Yeah.
heart
Yeah.
where that bullet hit
Yeah.
it. So that, I mean, that spear impact, I was very impressed with. It shot well in my rifle, and the terminal performance was great. But if I had to choose one bullet just to hunt, just solely on elk with the 7 PRC, I'd go with the 170 grain terminal ascent from Federal.
Yeah. It's a great bullet. Yeah.
I killed a moose with that bullet out of the 7 PRC last year, and oh man, that was not quite as nasty as the spear, but it was real good. Um, all right, very good. Oh, so actually, let's go back to the Nosler bullets. You're talking about the ballistic tip and how it's softer and all of that stuff. I've heard that there was an even softer version of the ballistic tip Nosler first released back in, I guess, the 80s or whenever, and then they made it a little bit tougher just because it was just a little bit too much. You know anything about that?
I've heard the same thing you have. John Barsness, writer up in Montana, kind of mentored me along when I started writing. He's told
Hmm.
me that. I've run across outfitters that wouldn't allow you to use ballistic tips because they'd had bad experiences, and they claimed that they were a softer bullet.
Hmm.
Um, so there's bound to be some truth to that. And honestly, all of these bullet manufacturers are all the time tweaking these bullets.
Hmm.
They'll make a bullet, they'll do a lot of testing with it, and then they'll get it out in the field, and then they'll get feedback. Really interesting story. When Berger first started marketing their bullets as hunting bullets, the VLDs,
Hmm.
uh, me and John Barsness went to New Zealand and shot a bunch of animals with them. But about a year and a half after that, they started getting complaints from hunters that the bullets were not opening or deforming when they hit animals, and which seems almost hard to believe because that bullet is so soft and thin jacket, pure leg core. What they found is target shooters were complaining that the bullets had little striation marks along the nose. They didn't look pretty, and the
Hmm.
target shooters wanted the pristine looking bullet. So Berger started using just a little bit more lube when they were forming those bullets, and it eliminated those striations in the nose of the bullet. But it also made the bullet nose form a little thicker because it was under less stress, and they quit opening on animals.
Oh, geez.
So now when you buy Burger VLDs, you'll see the yellow boxes and the orange boxes. Same bullet, one of them is formed with a little more lube than the other one is. And that's why you have the orange and yellow Burger bullet boxes now.
I did not know that. That is very interesting. And it is amazing how something like that had not even done to supposedly change
Yeah.
the performance of the bullet, ended up having that effect.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right. Well, so we talked about elk. I actually just mentioned moose. What would you use for hunting moose if you were going tomorrow?
The moose, that's a tough one because I think the 35 Whalen is probably the ultimate moose cartridge. Done used it. 4570 would be absolutely wicked on a moose, but you don't have a lot of reach.
Hmm.
So I might go with the 9.3 by 62 as an ideal. All the moose I've killed, I've shot with a 308. So, uh, but I think a 9.3 62 would give you a little more reach than a 4570, but I think that would be a cool moose cartridge.
I think so. I I I really like the 9.3. I'm going to use it later in this episode, so I'm not using it here. I think it'd be fine for this. What bullet would you be using then with
Partition, yeah, yeah. Was it 280? I think it's a 286 partition, I believe.
okay. Yeah, I've killed a lot of stuff with the 9.3. I've never used an Osler bullet in it though. I've used Swift A-frame. I've used plain old 286 PPU soft points and whatnot in it. 258 RWS H mantle. But I mean, I think a partition would be awesome on a moose. For this one, I chose a 300 Win Mag, 200 grain North Fork semi Spitzer. But I mean, moose are one of those deals that they're big, but they're not that hard to kill.
No,
I think
it's if you hit them right. I mean, I think a lot of it's funny, and I'm sure we'll get to Africa in a minute, but everybody comes back from Africa and says all those animals are so hard to kill. They ain't no harder to kill than any other animal. All us animals are the same, you know. But I think what happens in Africa specifically is deer hunters go to Africa and they're under a lot of stress. You got a professional looking over your shoulder. You got a tracker standing there watching you, and there's something about being in Africa that's just it puts you in a state of awe, kind of. And I think what happens is a lot of people go to Africa and they get ready to take the shot and they can't get steady. And instead of holding in the right spot, they hold in the center of the animal because they can keep the reticle in the center of the animal instead of on the right spot. And they center punch a lot of animals and they run off and make bad shots on them. And then the they think, okay, well, these animals are so much harder to kill. But yeah, if as long as you put it in the front of the diaphragm in a moose and get the lungs and the heart, like I said, all mine I've shot with a well, I take that back. I shot one with a 270, but yeah, they're not that hard to kill. Nothing is.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you shoot them and they stand there for a second, and maybe you shoot them again, and maybe again, and then they just tip over after.
Yeah, and you didn't really need the again and again, but that's what you
Yeah.
do. If they're standing there looking at you, you keep shooting.
Yeah, that one that I shot last year, it was a cow moose in Colorado. I shot her twice in the space of maybe 10 seconds, and then 10 seconds later she fell over, and that was that. All right, so that was moose. We're going to move to the big bears now. We're going to split this up into two categories as well. One, we're going to have coastal brown bear at close range. The other, interior grizzly bear at potentially a longer range.
There's 50 cartridges in my book, and there's probably 500 centerfire rifle cartridges, and you're making me run out of them. What I want to use, because I want to use the same thing for so much. Close range on a big bear, 45-70.
All right.
And I would use one of the Buffalo Bore hard cast loads. I think it's a 430 grain load. You can get about 1850, 1900 out of a 16-inch barrel. I know it'll work on a coastal brown bear. I've shot two Cape Buffalo with 45-70 and same load. So yeah, as far as reaching out, I would probably go with probably a 7 mag. 338 may be the ultimate. 338 Win Mag may be the ultimate brown bear cartridge, but I've shot one animal with that. Shot the rifle one time. I got no use for that thing. It kills on both ends, so I would probably go with a 7 mag and a 175 partition.
Now, that Buffalo Bore hardcast, that's probably not expanding at all, is it? It's just punching straight line through.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what it takes to stop one.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard of them, never shot one myself. So for me here with the bears, for the grizzly bear, I'd go 338 Win Mag. Cartridge, as Charles Askins described it, as gracefully bulbous as Elsa Maxwell. And,
yeah.
And I did have to look her up even after you told me not to.
Yeah.
But I used a 250 grain North Fork with that one. And for the coastal brown bear, 375 Ruger, 300 grain North Fork percussion point.
Yeah, really good choice. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, those are, yeah, one of those deals. I mean, both of those cartridges would work at both of those roles. And if I had to choose one to go with use on both bears, I'd probably go with the 375 Ruger. I've hunted with that a lot in Africa, and I really like it.
Yeah, it's a great cartridge.
Mhm. All right, so we got two more animals for North America. Then we're going to move to Africa. So for North America, American bison. What do you think there?
See, we're running out of stuff.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna take the easy way out on this. I've shot one bison. You probably read about it. That was the Wildcat cartridge. It was a 416 built on a 325 WSM. We called it the 416 SM squared. SM for short mag. The squared part was a custom rifle builder, Charlie Sisk and me put the cartridge together. So you had
Hmm.
Sisk man short mag. So
Mm,
we put the squared on it.
squared.
It worked perfect on the bison.
Hmm.
So
So what's the performance specs like on that cartridge for those that don't know what you're talking about?
I mean, it's a little less than the 416 rim mag, but we were trying to build. We had a buffalo hunt planned in Africa, and we were trying to build a light rifle that we could carry all day while we're walking behind, hunting buffalo. And so we went with that 416 caliber, but we did it on the short mag case. And I don't think anything ever happened to that. And the whole short mag story, that they must almost all went away now because of the lawsuit from Rick Jameson. But uh, yeah, that worked fine on the bison. The 4570 would be the real answer, right? With an old trapdoor rifle, But
Yeah.
I done used it.
Yeah.
You're you're pinning me in here.
Well, we only got a couple more left to go. So for me, I actually shot that bison right there with 375 H&H, 300 grain Barnes TSX, and it worked fine. Um, we got three more individual animal left to go. Last one for North America. Then we're going to do African Plains game, and then we'll do thick skin dangerous game in Africa. So last one for North America is a sheep / mountain goat hunt.
So you're not gonna like this answer. Um, I've been working with a new yet to be released cartridge. It's a 25 caliber, and that's what I would. It's running. You can run a 100 grain bullet at almost 3,400 feet per second. Um, and I've been working with those 102 grain control chaos bullets and the 110 AccuBond. The announcement will be made in January, but I don't know how you'd find a better flatter shooting sheep cartridge. Uh, the 257 Weatherby is the fastest uh, 25 caliber cartridge you can get. The downside of the 257 Weatherby is that 1 in 10 twist that has it, so you're limited to the same bullets you're going to shoot in a 257 Roberts. Now you could build a custom one and put any kind of twist barrel on it you want, but this new cartridge for sheep, you can hold. If you follow the what I call the 1/3 second rule when
Mm-hmm.
you're sighting in your rifle, that's how far your bullet can go in a third of a second. Then that tells you how far. If you had like a 6-inch pipe and you wanted to shoot through it out to the maximum distance, and the bullet would never get out of that 6-inch pipe, never more than 3 inches above or below your line of sight. This new cartridge take you all the way out to 325 yards, which is crazy.
Jeez.
Seven backcountry is about a 315-yard cartridge. This thing will run you out to about 325. So you could hold dead on a sheep out to 325 yards. So
Ooh, man.
when it's
Yeah.
announced in January, then you can fill in the blank.
So we'll say it's a mystery 25 cal for
Yeah.
right now. All right. For me, I'm going to go 6.5 PRC here. 143 grain ELDX. That was kind of a tough one for me because I've never hunted mountain goat or sheep. I've hunted tar in New Zealand. I used a 300 Win Mag on that. It was fine.
That's the same
But
thing I used there on the tar. Yeah.
mhm. But I think 6.5 PRC thereabouts, and I think you're selling this mystery 25 cal really well. It sounds like it'd be awesome for that and a lot of other stuff too.
Well,
I,
when you talk about sheep, you have to throw in the aoudad. Uh,
mhm.
if you really want to, I can't afford a sheep hunt,
Yeah, me neither.
but I can afford an aoudad hunt, and it's the same thing. It's like hunting desert sheep, and I've shot quite a few aoudad, and it's a fantastic hunt. That if you're interested, if you like to do a lot of glassing and hunting and stalking, it's fantastic. And 270 Winchester could fill that same role very well. It's a funny thing.
Yeah.
The aoudad I shot with the 270 was at 15 feet, if you can believe that.
Phil Macero told me a similar story about shooting an aoudad super close like
Yeah.
that. You can get them right up in your lap, or you can take 400 or 500
Yeah.
yard shot on one. No. All right, so that was that for North America. We're going to Africa now, and we'll just keep it simple. One cartridge for thick skin dangerous game, one all around for plains game, not including dangerous game. So what are your choices there?
You know, I used a 308. I've shot almost all the plains game in Africa with a 308 Winchester. Works absolutely perfect. You can find the ammo over there anywhere. But I'm going to save that one. Last year, I used a 7mm backcountry in Africa, and I did it to test it. I'm not a big fan of Magnum cartridges, and especially 7mm. I haven't been really attracted to those. I know you had Ron Spalmer on here, and if he could pick 7mm for everything, he probably would.
Yeah, yeah.
But the beautiful thing about that backcountry with a suppressed rifle is just almost no recoil, and like I said, you can hold dead on out to 315, 310 yards, depending on the bullet you choose. Uh, I think that would just be an ideal. It's not too much recoil, and it'll take care of any plains game in Africa.
Now, I know Federal offers a couple different loads for it with the Terminal Ascent, Barnes, Burger. I think they're Tip Fusion as well. What would
The
you
Tip
use?
Fusion was what I used in Africa, and it was funny. The rifle I had a 20-inch barrel. It was a Christensen Arms Ridgeline, and another hunter who was with me had a 7 PRC with a 20-inch barrel. And we took our little Garmin chronograph so we could get our data when we got there. And that 7 backcountry was almost exactly 200 feet per second faster than that PRC with a 175 grain bullet. That's
Wow.
substantial difference,
Yeah. And with just a 20-inch barrel too. So
Yeah, it was running
it's not,
almost $3,000. It was like $29.90 out of a 20-inch barrel.
and so it sounds like, at least in your experience, that cartridge is living up to what it was advertised as then.
Yeah, it's funny. Everybody's saying, well, you can't reload it. Well, you can reload it. They've been slow to get the dies out, and I've got some on the way, and we'll see what happens. But honestly, how many hunters are really reloading? Really, most people, and if you're talking about a hunting rifle, how many times are you going to shoot it? So I think it's a fantastic cartridge. The technology on those steel alloy cases, if Federal starts applying that to what I would call lesser cartridges, like 308 size cartridges, uh, here's something to think about with the suppressors and SBRs with no tax on those, and they may hopefully come off the NFA. You could have a 12-inch 308 and put a 4, 5, 6-inch suppressor on it, and you still got a really compact gun. Now, 12-inch 308 is not going to perform great out of a 12-inch barrel, but if you applied that steel alloy case technology and bump its velocity by 200 feet per second, that'll change the game for everything. I know when we went up to Federal, when they launched that cartridge, they developed the technology for the military, and they had some 5.56 ammo with the steel alloy cases, and it was 220 feet per second difference in a regular 5.56 and the other. So, I think with this short barrel thing, if it comes off the NFA and suppressors, that's going to change the world as far as short barrel rifles. But we don't have any real cartridges to work in short barrel guns, So I think there's some room for some exciting development there.
So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that could be kind of coming to a confluence here, like you say, with this technology and with the increasing prevalence of suppressors, and especially with these new legal changes that, one, we know we're not paying a tax stamp for it anymore. And like you said, if it comes off the NFA completely, we're already going to see a tidal wave of this stuff in January when you don't have to pay the tax anymore.
Yeah.
And then, down the road, if there's a legal challenge or something like that, and then you're able to just go buy a short barrel rifle and buy a suppressor. Man, that is a completely different world from just last year.
Yeah, and just imagine, we're talking short barrels and suppressors, but if it comes off the NFA, then you're looking at integrally suppressed barrels.
Mhm.
So you're looking at a 12-inch barrel on a 308 that is suppressed. Uh, like I said, we don't have the cartridges to work with those short barrels, but with this steel alloy case technology, we could have.
Blosser makes a rifle that is a short-barreled rifle with an integrally suppressed, that's integrally
Mhm.
suppressed. And of course, due to the rules and whatnot, it's more common over there than it is here. But I think it was a 338 caliber. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I was like, wow, that is a very interesting concept that I would love to see here. And we may be seeing that. And, to your point about this new technology, 277 Sig Fury, similar idea, not quite the same as the 7 Backcountry, but you're getting that high pressure deals, letting you run short action cartridge, 16-inch long barrel, and you're getting 270 Winchester performance out of an AR,
Right.
nonetheless, or
Mhm.
out of a semi-auto, nonetheless. And so that opens up a lot of possibilities here, like you said with the 5.56, or you take a 308, run it in a short barrel like that, and you get 30-06 or plus performance out of it with a sub 16-inch barrel with a suppressor on it. And man, that is a whole different
Yeah,
world.
and think how light the rifle will be too.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of carrying
Yeah.
around 8 pound rifles with scopes, now we're down to 6 pound rifles with scopes and suppressed. It'll be
Mm-hmm.
a new world.
Yeah.
The only other
Well,
thing I would like to add, I I have become addicted to the 284 Winchester this year,
mm-hmm.
and I've
Oh,
used it a
okay.
lot. I'm going to use it this year deer hunting. So that would be an absolute wonderful plains game cartridge in Africa. The downside is you're going to have to load the ammo for it.
Mm-hmm.
Federal offers ammo out of their custom shop,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean you've only got like one load to choose from. There's some small boutique shops loading it, but that 284 Winchester, that was the original short mag, really, and
Mm-hmm.
that would be a fantastic plains game cartridge.
Yeah, that's one of those cartridges that just refuses to completely die. It's found a home, and guys, I want to say Ron Spomer used it in a ultralight
Yep.
arms rifle, killed the sheep with it, and of course, is that the rifle that you have your 284 Winchester in?
Yeah, Wilson Combat did a 40th anniversary of the NULA, and they did them in 284 Winchester because that's the first cartridge Melvin put in that action.
Okay.
But the
Mm-hmm.
funny thing about the 284 is it's kind of gone, but it's fathered quite a few cartridges. The 450 Bushmaster, uh, kind of the 30 Remington AR, but they increased the rim diameter on it a little bit. Um, the
6.5 284.
6.5 284, the Weatherby 6.5 RPM is
Mm-hmm.
a 284 case that's lengthened, and so is
Yeah.
the 338 RPM. So it's funny how it's kind of died, but there's its influence is still lingering.
Mm-hmm. So for me, for let's see here, Africa Plains game, I went 30-06, plain old 180 North Fork semi Spitzer. I've not much to say about the 30-06. We could talk about your undying love for that cartridge later. So that was Plains game. Let's talk about thick skinned, dangerous game.
There's one answer: 375 H&H. I've seen it used. My personal PH in Africa. That's what he carries for everything, even elephant. I would use. It was funny. I shot a buffalo. I was hunting with Tim Sundles from Buffalo Boar, and he had sent me ammo for a 375, and he thought he had sent me 300 grain bullets,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't. But I shot the buffalo, and we pulled the bullet out, and I brought it home, and I was writing up the article about it, and I hadn't chronographed the rifle before I left. I didn't really see a need to. I wasn't going to shoot past 100 yards. What do I
Mm-hmm.
need to know how fast it's going for? And I went out and chronographed it, and I was getting almost 3,000 feet per second out of this. And there's no way you can do that with a 300 grain 375. And I pulled the bullet, and it was 235 grains. Worked fine on the buffalo. Somehow or another, somebody had packaged the wrong ammo and sent it to me. It was a rush shipment, so I don't know how that happened. But uh, what I also found was I shot a lot of plains game with it too, and that 235 grain TSX bullet worked just fine on buffalo and on plains game.
And did you find it just on the offside hide of that buffalo?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it penetrated great too, even though it was a whole lot lighter than what
Yep.
people normally use.
Well, but it's going so much faster.
Yeah.
You know,
So for me, for thick skin dangerous game, I considered the 375, but I already used it on my bison. I have a Ruger M77 Mark II or the Ruger Safari Magnum that I shot that bison with. I love that rifle, beautiful. I found it at a estate sale for one of my neighbors in El Paso that died. I just walked in there to see what was going on. I saw it laying on the counter. I was like, man, I got to have this. And so I've got a lot of use out of that rifle, but I can't use it in Africa because I already used this. I'm going to go 4.58 Win Mag, and I'll go 500 grain North Fork semi Spitzer / cut point solid for that. So that's all the individual animals we're talked about here. Now, last two choices. You can reuse something here if you want to. So best all around hunting caliber, not including dangerous game. And then the same question to include dangerous game. What are your two choices here?
well, the best all around for me would be the 308 Winchester. I don't have any attachment to it sentimentally or emotionally, but I've used it on everything and it just works.
Mm-hmm.
And I would probably go with 165 grain Nosler AccuBond.
Now, do you prefer the 165 AccuBond over the partition just because you're able to get better accuracy with the AccuBond?
Yeah, and it shoots a little flatter too.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not opposed to partitions. Lots of times when I'm working up loads for hunting rifles, I'll start with a partition, and if I get the precision that I'm looking for, then I'll just stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm going to stretch the distance a little, I always want to go with the AccuBond because you get a little higher BC, and you get just as good a terminal performance. I think it's going to retain somewhere between 65 and 80% of its weight, which is about the same as a partition, maybe just a little less, depending on where you hit and the velocity and all that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've shot so many animals with that 165 grain AccuBond and the 308. I got a total trust in it.
But then for this one too, I mean, the AccuBond's a great choice, and you could use it for, I mean, really almost anything that you would hunt reasonably with the 308. But for this one, you're not restricted to bullet either, so you could use anything that you wanted with anything on it. I think 308's a great choice here. What about for your all around to include dangerous games? You're hunting deer with this cartridge as well as buffalo potentially.
375 H&H.
So for me, I went with the 7 PRC for my all around, not including dangerous game, and the 9.3 by 62 for the all around. We'll recap everything here. So for you, Eastern Whitetail, 35 Remington, Mule Deer / Western Whitetail, 264 Win Mag, Antelope, 257 Roberts, Coues Deer, 6.5 Creedmoor, 300 Hammer for your feral hogs, 358 Winchester for Black Bear or bait, 35 Whalen, Black Bear Spot and Stalk, 300 Win Mag elk, 9.3 by 62 for moose, 7 rim mag for grizzly bear, 4570 brown bear, 416 SM squared for bison, your mystery 25 cal for sheep / mountain goat, 7 backcountry for Africa plains game, 375 for thick skin dangerous game, 308 and 375 for your all around hunting calibers, respectively, with and without dangerous game. So very interesting choices there. I also enjoyed some of the stories and anecdotes that we shared with that. Now, last time you were on the show, I asked you the question that I ask everybody to choose one bullet or one cartridge that you'd have to hunt with for the rest of your life. Pick one to hunt with the rest of your life. You chose the Nosler AccuBond. So today I'm going to make you answer the other side of the question. You have to choose one cartridge with any bullet that you want to hunt the widest spectrum of game for the rest of your life. 308?
Probably the 308. One of the problems with your questions is some of the choices I made were just things that seem right, like the 264 on the Western Mule Deer and 35 Remington on the Eastern Whitetail. They just seem like they go together to me. I didn't get to talk about the 25 Creedmoor, which I would do about 80% of everything we talked about with a 25 Creedmoor. But I've had this conversation before. Like if I was going to hunt West Virginia for the rest of my life and was never going to leave the state, I'd take a 223 Remington. I can do everything in West Virginia with a 223. I don't want to use it for elk, so you're probably going to be a 308. The 284 Winchester would fit in there just as well. The problem with it is ammunition. You got to handle it for it. but I would probably have to go with the 308, even though it don't mean anything to me. It's 25 Creedmoor is a lot closer to my heart because I wildcatted that cartridge a decade ago, but 308 Winchester.
Yeah, and the thing about a game like this as well is that like we talked about, you were intentionally saving certain cartridges to use down the line, and avoiding a perfectly reasonable use of it on something earlier on, and that's not a constraint that we have to live by in real life. So more than anything else, I think the conversation and the thought process is the best part of this game, more than the very specific choices for this or that.
Yeah, the I've been working a lot with the 8.6 Blackout recently, and you were talking about bear over bait. That
Hmm.
thing suppressed with some of the bullets that come for that would be absolutely wicked on black bear over bait. There's a lot of wonderful choices out there, and that's the great thing about cartridges is they give hunters the opportunity to personalize their hunting experience and be a little different than their buddy. And even if
Hmm.
your buddy chooses the same cartridge, you can argue about which bullet is best.
Hmm.
And in the end,
Yeah.
if you like you'll, I don't want to give away the end of the book, but if you can shoot, a lot of this stuff don't matter.
Hmm. That is true. There's a saying that I really like, and I think it was Lane Simpson talking about the 270 for hunting elk, and he says if you can shoot it, it's a great cartridge for elk, and if you can't, it's not.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can apply that to almost any cartridge with almost any animal.
Yeah,
Uh,
we wouldn't exist if 45 and 50 caliber round balls didn't work for everything out of muzzleloaders. We wouldn't
mhm,
be here. They killed all the animals in North America. They killed all the Indians that people had to fight off, when they were pioneering and settling the country. And now all of a sudden a 45 round ball and a 50 caliber round ball, that's not sufficient for anything.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, you got to imagine what our ancestors who were killing stuff with bows and arrows and spears and stuff now are thinking about us arguing if the 6.5 Creedmoor is enough to kill this
Yeah,
animal.
yeah.
Well, so tell the audience a little bit about your book that I'm holding here.
Yeah, so you can get all the ballistic information you need on cartridges on the internet now. That's all readily available. What
Mhm,
kind of inspired me with this book was if you've ever read the Nosler Reloading Guide,
mhm,
the introduction to every cartridge, they usually get somebody that's experienced with that cartridge to write, and you get real hunting stories about what they've actually done with that cartridge. And what I wanted to do, I took 50 of the cartridges that I've hunted with and killed stuff with throughout my life, and I just told the stories about the hunts and what worked and what I learned and what I saw. And it's kind of a mix. If you went to AI, if you went to Chat GPT or something and said, "Give me all the information on the 308 Winchester," you're gonna get all the ballistics in the world you need from that.
mhm.
There's nothing else you need to learn, but you're not going to hear real hunting stories and real incidents and what happened. And that's what I wanted to give is the stuff that you would tell around the campfire. If we're talking about, and just like we've had on this podcast, but you'd get the stories that you'd hear around the campfire when somebody says, "Hey, tell me about the 757." What have you done? Well, I've done this with it and this with it, and that's what I wanted to do with the book is give actual experiences with 50 of the cartridges that I've killed stuff with. And I intentionally left some of them out because, maybe there'll be a volume two. You know, uh, Somebody asked me, you said, "Well, why didn't you include this cartridge?" And I said, "Well, maybe next version.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to tell the stories and what I've seen, what have happened with, and there's a lot of emotional connection that you can tie to a lot of these cartridges. Like the 243 was what my dad used, and so that's all the book is stories of what I've seen and done with 50 different rifle cartridges.
So the book is Rifle Cartridges for the Hunter, a hunting journal spanning a half century. So a half century with 50 different cartridges in it by Richard Mann. I'll put a link in the episode description where you can get it on Amazon. I've really enjoyed reading it. We have a plethora, a very wide ranging uh, list of cartridges in here, from Wildcats like the 14221 Walker that I'd never heard of, to that's extremely small, to you know 223, 22, 250, 243, 65 Creedmoor, 308, all the standbys like that, up to and including the bigger stuff, 450 Bushmaster, 4570 Government, and 500 Cyrus. I will leave it to the reader to buy this book and read it to see what Richard thinks about the 30-06 and his opinion that nearly got him killed and fired, or had people asking for him to be fired on that. So he talks about that some more in the book. But I've really enjoyed reading that over the last couple of weeks since it last came out. So I encourage the listener to pick up a copy of it if you want some nice campfire style entertainment.
Yeah, like I've told people, set it by the toilet. It's usually a good toilet read. Each chapter is a good toilet read. And if you don't like what it says, then you can tear the pages out and use them.
Well, there you go. Well, Richard, it was wonderful having you on the show. Besides your book, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I've enjoyed watching your podcast and since our first introduction, a lot of great information. I think you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. So for the listener, I will put a link in the episode description as well to the last time that Richard was on. We talked about the 25 Creedmoor. He was one of the first guys to really start writing about it and whatnot. And I had the good fortune to have a nice hunt in Africa using a 25 Creedmoor this past summer. So it's a cool new cartridge that is certainly worth looking into. And I strongly speculated when I heard that it came out and was SAAMI standardized, there would be more stuff coming down the pipe with new 25 caliber cartridges now that we have some better bullets and whatnot for them. And so it sounds like that is indeed the case. So we'll see what happens in the next couple months on that front too.
All right, John, it was a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks a lot, Richard. Take care. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. This is the 5th time I have played this game, and everybody plays it their own specific way. But I did think that Richard had some especially interesting choices. Now, like we said, there are lots of cartridges and bullets that will work for hunting those different species of game under those conditions. And I think the exact choices we make in each case are less important than the why we made the selections that we did make. So just apply that same sort of analysis to your cartridge and bullet selections, and you should be in good shape. Links to my other best caliber game episodes, like this one, are in the episode description, so check them out if you haven't already listened to them. I've also put a link to where you can purchase a copy of Richard's new book, Rifle Cartridges for the Hunter, a hunting journal spanning a half century. So there's a link to that in the episode description as well, where you can get it on Amazon. I've enjoyed reading it. I'm sure you will too. And by the way, Richard was on the show previously, episode 388, where we talked about the 25 Creedmoor. That's another fantastic episode. And finally, before we go, make sure you vote for me for the Podcast of the Year category at the 2026 Gundies. Link is also in the episode description. You can vote once per day between now and when voting closes on 15 December. Thanks a lot in advance for your vote. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.